Welcome to our deep dive. You're interested in understanding schizophrenia, especially its neurocognitive aspects. And you've shared some excerpts from a university-level psychology course that are just packed with info.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack those today, ready to explore the characteristics, potential causes, and treatment options for schizophrenia.
Let's dive in.
First things first, I'm curious. When you hear the word schizophrenia, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, it's a word loaded with misconceptions.
I bet.
Many people think it means having a split personality.
Right.
But this source makes it very clear schizophrenia is not about multiple personalities.
Right.
It's a complex biological illness, like other illnesses you might be familiar with, that affects how people think, feel, and interact with the world.
So it's not about someone having two separate identities.
Exactly. It's more about a disruption of thought processes, emotional responses, and overall functioning.
Yeah.
Imagine a disconnect between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.
It's about the way someone experiences the world. Okay, so we've busted that split personality myth, but how common is schizophrenia, really?
It's more common than you might think. In the United States, it's estimated that 1 to 1.5% of the population will be diagnosed with schizophrenia in their lifetime.
Wow. So roughly 1 in 100 people.
And in India, the numbers are even higher, with an estimated 4.3 to 8.7 million people affected.
Wow.
That means you probably know someone who has been affected, even if you aren't aware of it.
Yeah, that really puts it into perspective. Okay, so we know it's not about split personalities, and it's more common than many people realize. Let's get into the specifics. What does schizophrenia actually look like? What are the signs?
Schizophrenia symptoms vary from person to person,
Right.
but they're often grouped into two categories, positive and negative symptoms.
Okay.
Positive symptoms are experiences that are present in someone with schizophrenia, but not in someone without the condition. For example, someone might experience hallucinations.
Like hearing voices or seeing things that aren't really there.
Exactly, especially auditory hallucinations. Imagine constantly hearing voices that comment on your actions or warn you of danger.
Oh, wow.
That would make it incredibly difficult to focus or feel at ease.
Yeah.
Other positive symptoms include delusions, often rooted in paranoia and disorganized speech and thinking.
So someone might believe, without any evidence, that others are plotting against them, and it would be very difficult to convince them otherwise.
That's right. Then we have negative symptoms, which are a decrease or absence of normal behaviors and emotions, so things that are missing rather than added.
This is where that idea of social withdrawal comes in, right?
Yes. Negative symptoms include things like flat affect, where someone shows very little emotional expression or apathy, where they have difficulty feeling pleasure or motivation.
Right.
You've probably read about how negative symptoms can make it incredibly difficult to hold a job or maintain relationships.
Yeah.
Imagine how challenging it would be to connect with others if you constantly felt emotionally drained and uninterested.
Yeah, that makes sense. Negative symptoms are less obvious than, say, hallucinations, but they can be just as debilitating in their own way. So we've got these distinct categories of symptoms, but when do they usually start to appear?
Typically, the first psychotic episode occurs in late adolescence or early adulthood, somewhere between the ages of 16 and 25.
Why is that age range so vulnerable?
It's likely a combination of factors, including genetic predisposition and the significant brain development happening during those years.
So we've got this vulnerable age range, but what actually causes schizophrenia?
It's not a simple answer. Schizophrenia isn't caused by just one thing. It's a complex interplay of genetic, biological, and environmental factors, almost like a perfect storm of vulnerabilities.
So it's more complicated than saying this one gene causes schizophrenia.
Much more complicated. Let's start with genetics. Twin studies have shown that the heritability of schizophrenia is around 80%.
Wow, that's a really high percentage. So genes play a major role.
They do. The probability of developing schizophrenia significantly increases if you have a parent with the disorder. And if both parents have it, the probability increases even more.
Oh, wow.
But it's crucial to remember that genes are not destiny.
So you can have the genes, but not necessarily develop schizophrenia.
Exactly. Even with a strong genetic predisposition, many people never develop schizophrenia. Other factors like those we discussed earlier likely need to be in play as well.
It's not just about nature. It's about nurture, too. Okay. So genetics are a big piece of the puzzle. What about prenatal factors? The source mentions some intriguing links there.
There's a growing body of research exploring how events during pregnancy and complications during birth can potentially influence the development of schizophrenia later on. Things like obstetric complications, fetal growth issues, and even hypoxia. a lack of oxygen during birth have been linked to an increased risk.
So something that happens in the womb or during delivery could increase the risk of schizophrenia later in life.
That's the current thinking. But, and this is crucial, the vast majority of people who experience these prenatal risk factors do not develop schizophrenia.
Okay.
It's not a simple cause and effect.
It's about increasing vulnerability. Okay. So we've got genes, prenatal influences. What about substance use?
It's complicated. It's not as straightforward as saying drugs cause schizophrenia. The relationship is much more nuanced.
I imagine it's different depending on the substance.
Yes. For example, studies suggest that cannabis use, especially heavy use, can statistically double the risk of developing schizophrenia.
Oh, wow.
That statistic is concerning. But I'm also curious about other factors that might be at play. For example, do people who are already predisposed to schizophrenia tend to use cannabis more frequently?
That's a great question. It's a reminder that correlation doesn't equal causation. What about other drugs? The source mentioned amphetamines and hallucinogens.
Amphetamines have a powerful effect on dopamine levels in the brain. And since an overactive dopamine system is thought to play a role in schizophrenia, amphetamines can exacerbate those symptoms. It's like they amplify what's already going on.
That makes sense. And hallucinogens.
Hallucinogens like ketamine and PCP are interesting because they can actually mimic some of the symptoms of schizophrenia.
Oh, wow.
They create a temporary state that resembles the condition. And that's why they've sometimes been used in research to try to better understand certain aspects of schizophrenia.
It's like they provide a window into what someone with schizophrenia might be experiencing. What about tobacco? It's surprisingly common among people with schizophrenia.
It is, and it's a bit of a paradox.
Okay.
Because despite these high smoking rates, people with schizophrenia actually have a lower risk of lung cancer.
That doesn't seem to make any sense.
It's counterintuitive, but it's a real phenomenon that researchers are still trying to figure out. It could be related to genetics, the medications people are taking, or maybe even the fact that they're more likely to die from other causes before lung cancer can develop.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so we've covered genes, prenatal influences, and substance use. But what about the environment we grow up in? Does that play a role?
Absolutely. Research has shown that social adversity, particularly during childhood, can significantly increase the risk of developing schizophrenia. And we're not just talking about poverty.
Right. I'm imagining things like childhood trauma and abuse.
Exactly. Studies have found a clear causal link between childhood trauma and an increased risk of schizophrenia. These early experiences can have a profound impact on brain development and can make individuals more vulnerable to mental health conditions later in life. It's almost as if those early experiences create a foundation of vulnerability.
So it's not just about major traumas, but also the day-to-day interactions within a family.
Yes, absolutely. The source mentions a concept called high-expressed emotion, which refers to family dynamics where criticism, hostility, or over-involvement are common. For example, imagine a parent constantly criticizing their child with schizophrenia about their lack of motivation.
Right.
This type of interaction can actually increase the risk of a relapse.
So even seemingly small things like the tone of voice someone uses can have a big impact?
Yes. And then there's the urban environment factor.
Okay.
Studies have consistently found a higher risk of schizophrenia in people who grow up in urban areas.
Wonder where that is.
Researchers are still investigating, but it likely involves a complex interplay of social, environmental, and even biological factors. It's interesting that something as broad as the environment we live in can have such a tangible impact on mental health.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of our minds and our surroundings. So we've dug into the potential causes of schizophrenia. Now let's shift gears and talk about how it affects the brain, the neurocognitive side of things. You've shared that you're particularly interested in this aspect.
Yeah.
Okay, can you break that down for us? What does that actually look like?
Think of your brain as a complex orchestra.
Really?
And executive functions are the conductor ensuring all the different parts work together harmoniously. Schizophrenia can disrupt this conductor, leading to difficulties in coordinating thoughts and actions. People with schizophrenia often struggle with memory problems, have difficulty with attention and focus, and experience challenges with these executive functions.
Could you give some concrete examples of what those challenges might look like in everyday life?
Absolutely. Someone with schizophrenia might struggle with planning a grocery shopping trip or making a decision about what to wear.
Right.
These are things that we often take for granted.
Right.
But for someone with schizophrenia, they can be incredibly challenging.
So it's not just about managing the hallucinations or delusions, it's about addressing those underlying cognitive challenges as well.
You got it. And these neurocognitive impairments often have a greater impact on a person's ability to function in daily life than the severity of their psychotic symptoms themselves.
That's a really important point.
It is, and thankfully there are ways to assess and address these impairments. Neuropsychological tests can be used to pinpoint specific areas of cognitive difficulty, which can then inform treatment strategies.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Speaking of treatment, let's dive into that now. Is there a cure for schizophrenia?
Unfortunately, there's no cure for schizophrenia yet, but treatment has come a long way.
All right.
The focus is now on managing symptoms, improving quality of life, and helping individuals achieve their full potential.
So it's about maximizing their ability to function and thrive despite the challenges.
Exactly. And there are a variety of treatment approaches available depending on the individual's needs and the severity of their symptoms.
What are some of the main treatment options?
Hospitalization is sometimes necessary during acute episodes of psychosis, especially if someone is a danger to themselves or others.
There's more about crisis management and stabilization in those cases.
Exactly. And thankfully, the days of long-term institutionalization are largely behind us. The emphasis now is on community-based care and supporting individuals in their own environments.
That's good to hear. What about medication? I know that's a common treatment for schizophrenia.
It is. Antipsychotic medications are the cornerstone of treatment.
Okay.
They work by reducing the activity of dopamine in the brain, which can help to alleviate positive symptoms like hallucinations and delusions.
So they're targeting that overactive dopamine system we talked about earlier.
Exactly. There are two main types of antipsychotics, typical and atypical.
Okay.
Typical antipsychotics have been around longer, but they can sometimes cause significant side effects.
Like what kinds of side effects?
Well, one example is tardive dyskinesia,
Okay.
which is a movement disorder.
That sounds serious.
It can be. Atypical antipsychotics are newer and generally have fewer side effects, although they can sometimes be associated with weight gain and metabolic issues.
It sounds like there's a balancing act involved weighing the benefits against the potential risks.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to work closely with a healthcare professional to find the right medication and dosage for each individual. Personalized treatment is key.
It's not just a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
But it's not just about medication, right? What about psychotherapy?
Psychotherapy plays a crucial role in treatment as well.
Okay.
It's a more holistic approach that addresses both the biological and psychological aspects of schizophrenia. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is a particularly effective approach.
What does CBT focus on?
CBT helps individuals with schizophrenia learn to challenge and manage their delusions and hallucinations, develop coping skills for stress and anxiety, and improve their overall functioning. It's about equipping them with tools and strategies to navigate their experiences.
That sounds incredibly helpful. Are there other types of therapy that are beneficial?
Yes. There's also Metacognitive Training, or MCT,
Okay.
which focuses on improving self-awareness of thought processes, reducing cognitive biases, and enhancing problem-solving abilities.
So it's about building those higher-level thinking skills.
Right. And it can be especially helpful for people with schizophrenia who struggle with the executive functions we talked about earlier. And then there's family therapy.
Family therapy makes sense. Family support is so important for anyone facing a serious illness.
Absolutely. And it's been shown to be incredibly beneficial for people with schizophrenia and their families. Family therapy focuses on improving communication and problem-solving skills within the family, reducing stress and conflict, and providing education and support for family members.
So it's about creating a more supportive and understanding environment for everyone involved.
Exactly. Family therapy can help to reduce relapse rates, improve treatment adherence, and enhance overall well-being for both the individual with schizophrenia and their loved ones.
Wow. It really does sound like we've come a long way in how we approach and treat schizophrenia.
We have, and it's a testament to the ongoing research and the dedication of mental health professionals worldwide.
It's been a really eye-opening exploration of schizophrenia so far. We've busted that split personality myth, explored the complex interplay of factors that contribute to its development, and started to delve into the latest treatment approaches.
We've covered a lot of ground.
I can't wait to dive even deeper.
You mentioned earlier that you were particularly interested in the neurocognitive aspects of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Let's delve deeper into that area.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by how schizophrenia affects the brain and cognition. The source material we've been discussing mentions neuropsychological tests. Can you explain what those are and how they're used?
Neuropsychological tests are specialized assessments used to measure different aspects of cognitive functioning, like memory, attention, executive functions, and language skills. They help clinicians understand the specific cognitive strengths and weaknesses of someone with schizophrenia. It's kind of like a cognitive map highlighting areas that might need extra support.
So it's not just about diagnosing schizophrenia, it's about understanding the individual's unique cognitive profile.
Exactly. And that information is incredibly valuable for tailoring treatment plans. For example, if someone is struggling with working memory, which
Mhm.
is the ability to hold and manipulate information in your mind, there are specific cognitive remediation techniques that can be used to strengthen that skill.
What are some examples of those techniques?
One common technique is called chunking, where you break down large pieces of information into smaller, more manageable units. Another technique is rehearsal, which involves repeating information over and over again to help commit it to memory. There are also computer-based training programs that can help improve attention processing speed and problem-solving abilities.
It's amazing how targeted these interventions can be. It's not just about addressing schizophrenia as a broad category. It's about recognizing and supporting the individual's specific needs.
That's the beauty of neuropsychological testing. It provides a roadmap for personalized treatment. Now, you've also read about how schizophrenia can impact social cognition, which involves understanding and navigating social situations.
Yes, I'm curious to learn more about that.
People with schizophrenia often have difficulties interpreting social cues, understanding other people's emotions, and managing their own emotional responses in social situations. Imagine trying to have a conversation with someone but struggling to follow their facial expressions or tone of voice. It can make social interaction really challenging.
That would make it difficult to build and maintain relationships.
Exactly. And that's why social skills training is an important component of treatment for many people with schizophrenia. It involves practicing specific social skills in a safe and supportive environment, kind of like role-playing different social scenarios.
That sounds like a practical and empowering approach.
It is. And it can make a real difference in helping people with schizophrenia feel more confident and competent in their social interactions.
I'm really struck by how much research and treatment has evolved in the field of schizophrenia. It's encouraging to see that there are so many avenues for support and that treatment is becoming increasingly personalized. Okay, we covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else about the neurocognitive aspects of schizophrenia that we should touch on?
One thing I wanted to highlight is that schizophrenia doesn't just affect thinking and behavior,
Okay.
it also impacts sensory processing.
What does that mean?
It means that people with schizophrenia might experience sensory information differently than others. For example, they might be overly sensitive to sounds or lights, or they might have difficulty filtering out background noise. This can be incredibly overwhelming and contribute to feelings of anxiety and stress.
I can see how that would add another layer of complexity to everyday life.
It does, and it's something that clinicians are becoming increasingly aware of. Sensory modulation techniques like using noise-canceling headphones or creating calming sensory environments can be helpful in managing these sensory sensitivities.
So it's about adapting the environment to meet the individual's needs.
Precisely. It's about creating a world that is more accessible and less overwhelming for people with schizophrenia.
This has been so informative. I feel like I'm starting to get a much deeper understanding of the complexities of schizophrenia, especially those neurocognitive aspects that I was so curious about.
It's been a pleasure sharing this information with you.
I'm ready to continue exploring.
Mm.
What else do we have in this stack of research? We've covered so much ground already, from debunking those common myths to exploring that really intricate interplay of genes, biology, and environment. It's clear that schizophrenia is incredibly complex.
It is. And I think one of the most important takeaways from our deep dive today is that schizophrenia is a real biological illness. It's not a character flaw or a result of bad parenting.
It's something that requires understanding, compassion, and effective treatment.
Exactly. And it's treatable.
Yeah.
While there isn't a cure yet,
Right.
treatment can significantly improve symptoms and quality of life. And as we've discussed, that treatment is most effective when it takes a holistic approach, addressing both the biological and psychological aspects of the condition.
We've talked about the importance of medication, psychotherapy, family support, and those targeted interventions for neurocognitive challenges.
It's all about empowering individuals with schizophrenia to manage their symptoms and live meaningful, fulfilling lives.
And it sounds like research is constantly evolving, leading to new and more personalized treatment approaches.
Absolutely. We're learning more and more about the brain, about genetics, about the impact of environmental factors. This knowledge is driving incredible innovation in treatment.
You know, earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that schizophrenia often emerges in late adolescence or early adulthood. I'm wondering, what are some of the early signs that family members or friends might be able to notice?
That's a great question. It's important to remember that not everyone who experiences these early signs will develop schizophrenia.
Right.
But if you notice a cluster of these changes in someone you care about, it's worth reaching out to a mental health professional for guidance.
Okay.
Some common early warning signs include
Yes.
social withdrawal,
Okay.
declining academic or work performance, difficulty concentrating, changes in sleep patterns, increased anxiety or irritability, and unusual thoughts or beliefs.
So it's not always about dramatic psychotic symptoms.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's about subtle shifts in behavior and thinking.
Right. And early intervention is key. The sooner someone receives treatment, the better the chances of managing their symptoms and preventing more severe episodes down the road.
That makes sense. I'm also thinking about the stigma surrounding schizophrenia.
Hmm.
We busted the split personality myth early on, but I imagine there are still many misconceptions that prevent people from seeking help.
Absolutely. Stigma is a huge barrier. It
Yeah.
can lead to shame, isolation, and fear of judgment, all of which can make it incredibly difficult for someone to reach out for support. It's crucial that we challenge these harmful stereotypes and create a more open and accepting environment where people feel comfortable talking about their mental health.
So it's about educating ourselves, challenging our own biases, and advocating for more compassionate and informed attitudes toward mental illness.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that mental illness is a part of the human experience, just like physical illness. It's about creating a world where people can seek help without fear of judgment or discrimination.
Well, I feel like our deep dive today has given me a much more nuanced understanding of schizophrenia. I'm walking away with a sense of hope, knowing that treatment is evolving and that there's so much we can do to support individuals and families affected by this condition.
I'm glad to hear that knowledge is truly empowering. And remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health challenges, please reach out for help. There are resources available, and you don't have to go through this alone.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into schizophrenia. We hope you found it insightful and helpful. And remember, the journey of understanding and compassion is an ongoing one.